Ulaku, Vunga Ann Crawford, Nunuvumiutak Amalu Nirhangumi Ilingyangvengmi Katimai. My name is Ann Crawford. I'm a lawyer, a mother, and an education activist. I live in Iqaluit, Nunavut, but today my work has taken me to Toronto, and I'm recording this in the Anglican Church archives, where many TRC documents were sourced. Thanks to the initiative of Joey, Zoe, and Erica, I'm honored to read from the TRC Executive Report, the Integration Policy, beginning at the top of page 71. The Integration Policy. By 1945, the Indian Affairs Residential School, starved for funding for 15 years, was on the verge of collapse. Not only was the existing Indian Affairs education system lacking money and resources, but there were no school facilities for 42% of school-aged First Nations children. Having concluded that it was far too expensive to provide residential schooling to all of these students, Indian Affairs began to look for alternatives. One was to expand the number of Indian Affairs day schools. From 1945-46 to 1954-55, the number of First Nations students in Indian Affairs day schools increased from 9,532 to 17,947. In 1949, the Special Joint Committee of the Senate and House of Commons, appointed to examine and consider the Indian Act, recommended that, quote, wherever and whenever possible, Indian children should be educated in association with other children. In 1951, the Indian Act was amended to allow federal governments to enter into agreements with provincial governments and school boards so that First Nations students could be educated in public schools. By 1960, the number of students attending non-Indian schools, 9,479, had surpassed the number living in residential schools, 9,471. The transfer of First Nations schools to the public system was described as integration. By then, the overall policy goal was to restrict the education being given by Indian Affairs schools to the lower grades. Therefore, it was expected that during the course of their schooling, at least half of the students in Indian Affairs schools would transfer to non-Indian schools. The integration policy was opposed by some of the church organizations. The Roman Catholic Church officials argued that residential schooling was preferable for three reasons. One, teachers in public schools were not prepared to deal with Aboriginal children. Two, non-Aboriginal students in public schools often expressed racist attitudes towards Aboriginal students. And three, Aboriginal students themselves felt acute embarrassment over their impoverished conditions, particularly in terms of clothing they wore and the food that they ate. These were all issues that students and parents raised as well. Thank you.